Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey-Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Dear listener, I hope you're keeping well in these times. The external world can feel very overwhelming at the moment, and so people are coping with that in different ways. It's good to take note of what makes you feel better, whatever that is, something that serves you and gives a long-lasting sense of well-being and wellness, something that grounds you. It can be as simple as walking in your local park, but it will be something that you'll want to lean into right now and giving yourself that space to go for a walk at lunch if that's what you need, or 20 minutes of yoga at home or meditation, and especially taking that time for yourself when you're really busy, when it feels like you're telling yourself you probably shouldn't. That can make all the difference to your capacity to cope in this very difficult time we're currently moving through. Many of you are being called to action right now in some way, whether it's mobilising people to call out the injustices in the world, or whether that's keeping your families well in some way, because people are struggling, that there's so much going on that everyone is feeling it. And I know myself that my dreams have become very vivid of late and feel like big dreams sometimes, and lots of people are having those. I'm finding I need to rest more, and I'm also finding, like many others, that themes from the past are re-emerging and requiring my attention. Being gentle with yourself at this time and taking care of your needs is paramount. Because we're all suffering with the trauma of what's going on in the world, people around us can behave in ways that feel hurtful or confusing. So recognising and remembering that everyone's generally struggling and feeling discombobulated and may not be able to name that for themselves. As always, joining with whoever your tribe is valuable right now, and do reach out if you're feeling that it's all too much. There is always a way through the difficulties, even if it's not obvious to you at the time, and there's always someone who can help and wants to help in some way. We just celebrated Beltane, or Bealtaine, this week, the fire festival which marks the beginning of summer. Everything is beginning to burst forth and bloom in nature. I'm about to take off to Hickey-Hall in Nottingham to join with my friends Kate Ray and Neil Rushton for another gnoming expedition to research the Willerton gnomes, and I'll shortly be releasing a film about the last visit. This episode coming up is a really lovely chat with a woman who grew up in Cork in the Republic of Ireland. She shares some experiences from her childhood and an occasion when she was pixie-led in a forest in Edinburgh as an adult. We also hear about her grandmother's experience as a child when she was churning butter on her father's dairy farm in Cork, and how a priest came to heal a hex that was put on the family's dairy production, pre-mechanisation of course. In the bonus episode, we hear of other stories relating to the churning of butter and how supernatural forces were believed to take effect during that process. We also hear from another woman who, as a child, had a similar experience to our guest whilst playing in vegetation near her home. Consider joining us on Patreon to hear that exclusive episode and to join with our community. It's a great way to support the show, and another way you can support is by rating the show and leaving it a review. Thank you. It all helps very much. I hope you enjoy this discussion. For me, listening not only to the old traditions, but even the surrounding that our guest grew up in, I feel myself pining for a world that was interconnected with nature, where our food growth and processing was closer to home, and where faith and local customs handed down by our ancestors aided us to commune with the land. I like to think that many of us are now striving for that simplified version of living again, in the knowledge that we are not alone in this realm, as our ancestors must have known. to recapture that, we can begin by remaining curious.
Time to renovate, transmutate. Time to renovate. I've been many years out of Ireland now. I had a pretty typical upbringing in the wilds of North Cork. While my parents moved to the UK, like thousands of others of their generation, and I was born in the UK, we moved back when I was about 2.5. So all I've ever known is Ireland. And I grew up in the Ireland of the 1970s and 80s. I'm giving away my age now, of course, but that's when I grew up. And the Ireland of that time was a very different time to the Ireland of now. And while it is a green and pleasant land, we grew up, as I say, in a very typical Catholic, large family. But I grew up listening to tales and fascinated by tales of the other world. The other world. And what do I mean by the other world? Well, I'm going to include everything in there, spirits and ghosts, but also tales of the wee folk, the good people, as we call them. And I've always been fascinated. So for as long as I can remember, I've been aware, or I've been made aware of the possibility of the existence of the good people, as we'll call them. Where I grew up is, I say, beautiful and green countryside. And that's all very well in the daytime when the sun is shining. But if you've ever visited that part of the country, when the sun goes down and darkness descends on the land, it can become a very different place. And it's easy for one's imagination to run away. I've had what I believe to be unusual encounters over the years, not only in Ireland, but also then as a young adult when I moved to Scotland, but more of that later. So as I say, Ireland is very much as you see it in the pictures. It's green fields and cows and streams and ancient. There is a feeling. It doesn't take much effort if you go out and you sit quietly. It's very easy to imagine that you are kilometers from civilization. You might only be 3 or 4 or 5 kilometers, but the silence and the quietness, can overcome you very quickly, and very easy to connect with the energy. Dotted across the landscape, you'll see standing stones and you'll see ruins and forts from the people that lived before now. Something happened to me when I was approximately 12. Now, as I say, I come from a large family, and so lots and lots of cousins, lots of laughter, lots of joy. How my parents and my grandparents put up with all the noise, I don't know, but big gang, big families, lots of cousins, lots of fun. And I do remember this particular day, as I say, I was about 12, and we were playing in the fields behind my parents' house. My cousins and my brothers and sisters somehow left me on my own and ran back towards the house. I didn't think much of it. It was brightest day, lovely, sunny, warm. And as I was going along the path, we call them boreen. A boreen is a country path or a lane, normally single track. As I was going towards the house, as I came to this clump of hawthorn trees, there was a clump just on the side of the path. I thought I heard somebody sniggering. That's the only way I can describe it, as sniggering. And I thought, that's my cousins trying to frighten me. And I looked in through the thorns and the briars. I couldn't see anybody. And I stepped back and I looked up into the hawthorn. I thought, is that a bird? Have I heard a bird? And then I can't really explain to you, Joe, but I started to feel a little uncomfortable. But my logical brain was like, that's nothing. But I heard it again. And the only way I can describe this snickering was like a bird trying to imitate human laughter. laughter. It didn't sound quite human, but it was definitely snickering and mischievous laugh. So again, logical brain set in. I thought, okay, it's my cousins. And I called to my cousins, my brothers and sisters, is that you? I know that's you. Stop frightening me. You're not frightening me. But something said, get out of there and get to the house. So I ran back up to the house, only to discover that my brothers, my sisters, and my cousins had returned to the house about 20 minutes previously. So whatever I heard in the clump of hawthorns, I have no idea to this day. And I was trying logically to think what it could be. Was it a bird? As I say, could it be a raven? Because I know ravens are great mimics. To this day, I don't know what it was, to tell you about my experiences. As I say, I was brought up, in a typical big family, but listening to tales of my grandmother, my father's mother, who had a great belief and respect for the fairy people. The hawthorn is believed in Ireland and I think in other countries too to be one of the sacred trees, and it is believed that the fairies dwell beneath the roots of the hawthorn, and under no circumstances should you damage a hawthorn. You certainly would never remove a hawthorn from your land. However, you were permitted as a bride to collect the flowers when they come out. I think around the month of April or May. However, with great respect, it has to be done. It's not just cut a clump and thanks very much. It has to be done with great respect. So my grandmother would, and as children, we used to love that beautiful white flower, that blossom. My poor grandmother would have a canary if she saw us wearing the flowers in our hair. We used to think we were princesses. We used to wear garlands of this in our hair. And she would absolutely have a fit if we brought any of it into the house, for fear of fear of offending the fae, and for fear of bringing bad luck into the property. So that was a big no. That was definitely one I remember. Obviously then, on May Eve, as children, it was coming, it's Ireland, it's coming into the summer, the nights are getting longer. You were told, absolutely, as the sun went down, as the sun went below the horizon, back into the property, no wandering the fields and the roads after that time, for fear that you would be taken and you would be never seen again. So I remember my grandmother saying, they'll take you, and you'll never be seen again. You'll go to the fairy world. And so as kids listening to these stories, and she was quite serious. It wasn't like, they'll take you, ha, nod, wink, wink. No, they will take you. So this, I guess, these beliefs or this respect has been passed down really from, as I say, my father's mother to me, and it's come right down to today where I'm living. Very, very careful about damaging trees, particularly the sacred trees. Now, where I'm living, unfortunately, we don't get a lot of hawthorn. Cutting and being disrespectful to nature in general, no. This is something that's filtered down, and I guess that's perhaps a good thing. I think it's, and I try to pass this teaching to my children. Just being respectful. As I say, I understand things have to be cut and they have to be looked after, but mindlessly destroying things, no, I don't like that. So, if something has been that way for hundreds or perhaps thousands of years, just leave it be. So yeah, I don't like to destruction of trees. I don't like to see the earth dug up for no reason other than for man's progress. No, I understand.
Because you do get people that just don't value nature whatsoever. But I feel like they are in a minority. I really hope that, the vast majority of people do really appreciate the trees that are around them, the green spaces, and that it's people or maybe organisations slightly lost touch because, as you say, they may have developed different value system. It's a powerful thing that your grandmother passed down to you. And of course, she was talking about the way that the fairies, they do transport at these times. They're going across the land, and that you do hear folk tales and encounter tales where it's been those times of the year, your Beltane, your Samhain, on the festivals when they will journey. If you get caught up in that, you may go off with them and never be seen again. So there were always those tales. I mean, there's loads of those. And the Dukas, I don't know if you read the Dukas, the folklore collection of Ireland. Oh, and I'll send you the link to that. But there's many old tales. Oh, it's wonderful. At the in the early 20th century. Yeah, they are invaluable. Called the Schools Collection. I think it was 1930s. They went into the schools and they collected. They got the child to go home and speak to the eldest person in the family. So, that would have been somebody's grandmother or father. Ask them to tell the tales that they knew from way back, or whatever they had to offer. And so, you were delving back into perhaps their childhood and bringing all the tales from their childhood too. And so there's this amazing collection of these, folklore and, guess what happened to, Billy O'Reilly up the road when he, and he disappeared. Is this very rich source?
I think it's so important that because it's the link to our past. And this doesn't matter where you are, if it's the UK, if it's Ireland, it doesn't matter the country. If we lose that oral link, that story, if they're not preserved somehow, some format, it will be lost, and it will be lost forever. And we will be poorer as a result of this. I firmly believe that. The other thing is, you often hear in at least in Ireland, and I'm sure in the UK too, she's away with the fairies, that one. Ignore her and her stories. And I think that's can be quite hurtful and dismissive. And I always say, don't mock what you don't understand. Be careful there. Be careful. Don't mock. It may seem primitive or old-fashioned or whatever, but perhaps there is a grain. Maybe we could open our minds a little. Maybe there is a grain of truth in this. And I firmly believe there's more to this earth than just what we can physically see and touch. There is much more. But I think there's a growing group of people, thank goodness, that are at least listening to these accounts with open minds. I'm not expecting you to embrace wholeheartedly the stories, because I know sometimes they can be a little difficult to believe, but with an open mind about the stories. And I think you preserve them and keep them in our mind, keep them in mind.
Resurrect them in some ways,
absolutely.
Because there's kind of when you had that experience as a 12-year-old, what was the impression that you got? If you could imagine what or who that being might have been, I'm interested to know if, firstly, did it feel familiar to you in any way?
You see, that's the thing. I'm getting chills now talking to you. The hair is starting to stand up on the back of my neck. Actually, just right now, with that, just as you asked that question, my little 12-year-old logical brain was going, "Oh, it's the cousins." But something told me it wasn't. And maybe you'll call that your intuition, your sixth sense, whatever. Something. But again, I was fighting that intuition. It didn't feel familiar. It felt odd. It didn't feel not extremely threatening, but not comfortable. Yeah. Like somebody was laughing at me at my expense, or something was laughing at me. I felt I was being watched. That's the only way I can still remember clearly standing on the road and thinking, and something in my brain was saying, run, go, just go. You're not welcome here. Go. But I was a cocky 12-year-old. No, I'm not frightened. You're not going to frighten me. But really I was. I can only explain it like a tingling sensation, but not comfortable tingling. To say that feeling of being watched. It is taking pleasure in your discomfort. That's the only way I can describe it. But again, the brain going, it's just my cousins, so you won't frighten me. And then when I got to the property and I saw it wasn't. Now, you may argue, was it a neighbour? We lived absolutely out in the countryside. Of course, we had neighbours, but the nearest neighbours on one side were half a mile away, so a kilometre. The other side, I don't believe these farmers would be standing in the field frightening a 12-year-old. There's more important things to do, like attend to cows or whatever. So what was it? To this day, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, outwardly, you don't know. But I think there's something happens in our bodies. And as you say, you had this kind of response that, the tingling. Whereabouts do you remember feeling it? If you think back now to that laugh, if that's comfortable for you to do, where in your body do you feel that?
On my arms, on my forearms, and along the back of my neck here, just here. You originally absolutely felt it. I can feel it now again. It's this, like, the only way I can describe it, like a rippling, like a cold jelly feeling. And the hairs stood, which is a response. I know that's an actual physical response to something that's been measured. You can measure that. That's the sensation. This is going to sound a little crazy. It's like it's hard to put this, like a bubble, like going between I don't want to say dimension, like slipping between this bubble, this and there, and back again,
like a membrane, so that you're kind of you're shifted into some other kind of experience. You'd lived there from when you were 2.5 in that same place.
That same property. Yeah.
Had you or any of the other children ever experienced anything else there? What kind of games did you play out there? And do you ever remember having any strange experiences or dreams as a child?
Yeah, I did have some very strange dreams in the property. Now, maybe it's me. Maybe it's just being aware and growing up where I did. I have to say, it was the 70s and 80s. We didn't have the distractions that modern kids do. So a lot of it was invent your own entertainment. Get out of the property, get out into the fresh air. There was no such a thing as mollycoddling and my darling, I will take you here and I will take you there. Yeah. My parents, like many parents, just didn't have time. They're running big households. Get your bike, get out into nature and explore. I did have a very similar experience, maybe 4 or 5 years later, in it, not on the property itself, but between my parents' property and the village. Again, snickering and laughing in the hawthorn. The snickering seems to follow me around, laughing again at me. Again, I hear myself doing it. The logical brain. It was an animal. It was a bird. You You didn't hear it properly. It was a cow in the field. But I looked, and there was no cow, and there was no property. And again, it was the brightest part of the day. It wasn't like dark, where I mentioned your imagination can run away with you a little bit. And it's countryside. There are no city lights. There are no village lights. Your imagination can really play games with you. But yeah, I was probably 14 or 15 and similar. This laughing, this sneering, I guess it might be. And again, for all the world, it sounded like a bird laughing like a human. That's the only way I can describe it. Not quite human. Not quite human. I mean, there are sounds that the human voice can make. That wasn't quite that. The other way, it's like a bird imitating a human, or laughing or sneering like a human. And 3 or 4 times, kind of I was kind of, I can't even do it. Strange. And I clearly heard it again. I was on my bike. I was actually going to take a message to my neighbour from my mum. And happy in myself. Again, it's a summertime, nice, bright evening. Nothing that should worry me, nothing. I traversed that road 1,000 times. Just going to take the message up and then return. But again, that feeling of something isn't quite right, and you better get on your bike and keep cycling. That's the feeling I had on both occasions. Just go. You're being laughed at, you're being watched. And I wonder, maybe now with with the wisdom 35 years later of growing up in life, perhaps it was a form of communication. Perhaps it was a form of testing me to see my reaction. Perhaps it wasn't meant to make me uncomfortable. Maybe it was just them, they, it, whatever, testing my reaction.
If you think about that, how does that feel to you?
I would say, why me? Why me? But maybe because I did react the first time, maybe there are people who are just a little bit more open or sensitive to certain beings, energy, whatever you want to call it. And maybe it was just simply a way of communicating. Because for a long time I thought they were laughing and mocking. But perhaps they weren't. Perhaps it was simply, hello, can you hear me? That kind of a thing. Yeah. Oh, you can. And simply that. Why? I have no idea. But I've had several other several strange things happen to me all through my life, both with connection with the Fae and what I believe to be ghostly as well. But that's for another day.
I'm thinking about your grandmother and what she's passed down to you this way of looking at the world that you've brought into your life, and now you're sharing with others too. In talking to me about this, do you remember if she ever had any particular rituals or sayings or traditions that she practiced and may or may not have passed on to you, but you remember her doing?
Certainly, my grandmother was a big believer in the fairy, a big believer, and belief as well in Pishogs, which is the Irish, Irish perhaps in other ways as well, of using energy against people to cause bad luck as well as good luck. And so my grandmother believed her father, so my great-grandfather, was a victim of hexes and bad luck, and firmly believed it. So I remember my grandmother, a bird coming into the property was bad luck. Bringing the hawthorn was bad luck. I do remember as well, milk and honey being left as little offerings to the fae to appease them, just leaving small amounts,
what sort of things did she leave them?
Milk and honey, I remember, and I do the same. Milk and honey being left like a little sweetener, like, this is for you. Don't upset, like there'll be a distance between us. This is for you, to keep you sweet. And now we'll all live our lives, and you live in your existence. And yeah, I do remember that. And stories, just her stories about the neighbours growing up and their experiences as well about if you did strike a bargain with the fairy people, perhaps the bargain would be for life. And you would never, ever be free of this bargain. You would not be able to break from this bargain. And hearing tales about neighbours of my grandmother when she was a child, so going back 100 years at this stage in time in rural Ireland, certainly one neighbour, I believe, who it is believed that he struck a bargain with the fae, and for the rest of his life would have to go out in the evening. And he never spent another night in his bed. He was out all night and would come back in the morning. If he took off his shoes, he would tip his shoes upside down and say things like, get out, come on, get out of there. And there would be nothing in his shoes before he put his shoes back on. So
these were people that she grew up with in her neighbourhood when she was growing up. So would have gone back to what kind of time?
Oh gosh, she was born in 1914, I believe. So 1920s, it would be 100 years, 1920s, 1930s. But again, the rural Ireland of the 1920s and 30s is absolutely light years away from Ireland of the 2020s. Everybody now has a motor car, electricity has come, the internet has come. These places, as I say, you might only be 3, 4, 5 kilometers from a village, but it felt like you were absolutely at the tail end of civilization somewhere. So the practices were strong and the beliefs were strong. And also, there's a belief that you could be hexed. My grandmother strongly believes that her own father was hexed.
What was the story? What did she think had happened?
I was actually talking to my dad about this yesterday, and he tells me the tale, because I don't remember this story from my grandma. It was my dad who said that my grandmother, like in many farms around Ireland, she was milking the cows, all done by hand, of course, and took the milk that she to the dairy. Now, the dairy was very often just a very small little stone building where butter would be made from the milk. A small little stone room. And one day she found smeared on the door this oily, I won't say buttery, oily, slimy substance, white, smeared on the doors. She started the process of making the butter, there is quite a lot of work involved in making butter. Again, all pre-electricity, all done by hand. And no matter how many times she churned and tried to make the curds rise to the top, they couldn't. She ended up with slop. You couldn't do anything with the milk. It wouldn't churn into butter. And then after that, her own father's wealth dwindled, such to the point that the poor man died quite penniless. And my grandmother absolutely is convinced that this was a hex. It was dark magic that was used. And it got so bad that at one stage my great-grandfather went to see the parish priest. And the parish priest listened and said, okay, well, I'd come to the property and I'll bless the property. Very often holy water was used. I've also heard of salt being used to repel any negative, to cleanse. And the story goes that the priest said to my great-grandfather, I'm going to say the prayers now, going to say the Mass. And he said, while I'm saying the Mass, the one who put the hex on you, I will call him, and he will come to the door, and you will know that it is him that is the one, he or she, the one who's putting the hex. And my great-grandfather apparently said, it's okay, I have a feeling I know who this person is. He said, but he will be compelled to come. I will use the power of Christ and call him. And sure enough, during the prayers, a neighbour came to the door looking for something very curious. I don't know what he was looking for, to borrow something. And so, yeah, I do remember, as I say, it was my father telling me about that yesterday. So belief, Christian belief in the faith, it was all a part of growing up in Ireland at that time, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, well into the 50s. I believe it was my own mother who said, I think many parts of Ireland didn't get electricity till the 50s or 60s. So you can imagine it's a world away from the UK, the industrial cities of the UK, London. I'm sure you were decades and decades ahead of us in terms of that. This is rural. This is very far from anything. And so the old practices, the old ways held strong.
It's great that the priest made room for these beliefs. I mean, his own, I imagine that's from his own upbringing and what his grandmother told him and what his mother and father told him and what he felt from the landscape. And, wouldn't you just love to talk to that priest? I
Absolutely.
imagine the kinds of situations he got brought in to solve. And was there a reason why the neighbour would have done that? Was it because he was also a dairy farmer?
Well, it was exactly that. The belief still is, that by hexing a neighbour or like hexing somebody, all their good luck comes to you.
Right.
It comes to you. So all the positive goes to the one doing the hexing. It's like a curse. But of course, there's a price to be paid for all this meddling and all this dark energy. At some stage, you'll have to pay. I don't know if in this world or in the next, but this was quite common. Again, speaking to my father yesterday, he said, if you found on your property or on your land, if you found rotten eggs, if you found the carcass of an animal where there shouldn't be the carcass of an animal, this was believed that somebody was hexing you. So yeah, and there was a fear. I mean, some of these things, they sound so unpleasant. Imagine finding the carcass of a rotting animal somewhere. It sounds twisted.
It happens in the countryside, though, doesn't it? But I guess it's a different thing altogether to find something on your own property. So that that would lead you to question why. If something's been put there with ill intent, it has ill intent within it, and then what happens then? And I wonder what happened to that guy afterwards. Was there any sense of what happened to him?
There was, after that, bad luck, it would seem.
Right.
Ill luck befell the family, and one son died and another one. Oh, there was a whole series of. That's what I'm saying about paying the price. Yeah. If you enter into this negotiation or deal, or if you meddle, I believe, if you meddle in these things with bad intention, with pure bad intention, perhaps you'll pay the price. They always say it, you send it out and it'll come back to you. But if you send out good intention, good will come back. If you send out cruel or evil intention, then watch yourself, basically. Be prepared. So
it's hard to sort of work with a good intent when you feel like somebody has really been a pain in the bum and is perhaps causing you a lot of grief. But you do have to remember that what what you give out comes back.
Definitely does. I mean, I think we're human, like that. We don't. Of course, we're human. You know, somebody clips ahead of you in the queue, and I mean, come on, you're thinking all sorts of unpleasant things. That is human to lose your temper.
Bringing your attention back to, okay, yeah, maybe that person is, needs to be quick because they've got a child sitting in the car they haven't been able to bring in or whatever, or they've got to get home to get a phone call because their mother is ill and they need to speak to the doctor for their mother. All these sorts of things go on in people's lives and make them behave in different ways, like if someone's cut you up in a queue or, so you can, but in that moment, it's hard not to sort of feel annoyed. But
as an adult, I mentioned earlier, I did move to Scotland, and there I think I had probably my strangest experience to date. I got lost. I was waylaid. So I lived in Edinburgh, in Scotland, for 10 years, and all grown up at this stage, moved away from Cork. Unfortunately, I'd come down with a terrible, terrible summer cold. It was the beginning of summer, really, really bad. And I'd spent a week in my bed. And you know how it is, Joe, when you've had a week in your bed and you're covered, you're well enough to go back to work, but you're not great. You can still be quite pale. And my boss at the time, in the place I worked, said, I think you're looking a little, I think she said pillywally, a little pale. A walk in the fresh air would do you good. Now, it was the month of June again. All of these things seem to happen in the early summer. I don't know if that's coincidence or not. She said, I think it'd be good for you to get out. And it was such a beautiful day. Scotland being where it is, it's the most glorious country, but good weather is in short supply up there. When you get a good day, you have to take advantage. She said, why don't you go to the local forest? You walk there, it's about a mile. You walk around the path and you walk back. That's a 3-mile walk. You can do that in an hour. And I thought, yeah, I can do that in an hour. And it'll be good for me. So, bear in mind, I hadn't been feeling very well. And it was a glorious day, off I set. I knew that forest path that was near where I walked. I traversed this many, many times. And it's a beautiful circular walk. And then I thought, I'll just come back the path. I went and I'll be back in an hour. So off I set. Birds are singing, sun is shining. And I came into the forest, into the start of the forest, and had been walking about 5 minutes. And I crossed a stream. And the stream, my goodness, there was probably 3 inches of water in it. A stream, I'd hardly call it a stream. It was a flow of water. And I crossed the other side of the stream. And I got maybe 5 minutes along the path on the other side. Now, something that struck me as strange, the path leading to this path before the stream was man-made. And then I crossed the water, and the path that led on the other side was covered in pine needles. I remember being absolutely covered. That's something that struck me. But anyway, I walked along the path, and I got about 5 minutes into this journey, and I realized the first thing was absolute silence. Absolute. I can't explain this to you. It's like the silence. It's like a vacuum. No birds. No sound of traffic. Nothing. Not even the wind. Nothing. I thought that was a little strange. There's just this quietness. And also, as I said to you previously, it was a beautiful sunny day. But the only way I can describe this was it's like somebody had put, like somebody had dimmed the sun. That's the only way I can describe it to you. Like somebody had put some sort of covering over the sun. Now, it wasn't dark, but it certainly was noticeably dimmer than it had been 5-10 minutes previously. continued along. And I started to feel really, really tired and sleepy, almost out of it. And I thought, oh gosh, I don't think I've fully recovered from this nasty head cold. Maybe it's taken more out of me than I realised. Maybe I'll cut short my walk and I'll just return to the office. Starting to feel quite weak and sleepy and really spaced out. And then that's the second thing. I'm a country girl, so I grew up being able to find my location. City kids can do it with, cityscapes. They can find the building and they know this building and that building, and they can orientate themselves. Well, all my life I was able to do it in the countryside, so I was pretty good at, if I go this way, I'm going to the east, and the sun is here, and then if I go along that way, I think I'll come out there, and I think that so quite good at that. But I couldn't get my bearings at all. Everywhere I looked, the trees seemed exactly the same. They seemed a carbon copy of each other, which is a little strange. So finally, I came to the edge of this clearing, and I looked down on what I thought should be the city of Edinburgh. And the city of Edinburgh, it's not a very, very big city, and there are many, many famous landmarks. It's very easy to orientate yourself. Well, that's here, so you're here to the east, or you're to the west, or you're to the south, and the sea is there. But I looked down and I didn't recognize any of it. The buildings looked very, very far away from where I thought they should be. Now, where I worked was 3 miles from the city centre, so that's not far. The buildings looked all the same, just like the trees. It looked like a film set. That's the only way I can describe it to you. And there was this growing sense of unease in my stomach this time. And I was trying not to panic. There was a feeling of panic. And I thought, God, what's happened? Where am I? Come on, get your bearings. Go back the way you came. But then I didn't know which way was back. I know that sounds utterly ridiculous. But I was getting completely disorientated. I couldn't find a landmark. I couldn't find anything that looked familiar. There was nobody to ask. How strange. It's lunchtime on a nice day. There should be dog walkers, joggers. It's a well-known park. I realized I'm going around in circles. And as I say, this wave of panic. And then, for some reason, I lost my temper. I really lost my temper. That somebody is playing a trick on me. And so in my broadest Corkonian accent, I said aloud, "Will you guys cut it out?" I think there might have been a few colourful words in there. I'm not going to repeat them. Will you guys cut it out? You've had your fun. Now let me be. Oh God, come on. It can't be so hard. And with that, I took a deep breath, walked maybe 10, 15 feet, and suddenly realized where I was again. I was where I thought I should have been originally. And everything seemed to be... I passed through an area that was covered in thick undergrowth. And again, there was, back into normality, back in the land of the sun. And I don't know to this day what that was. When I arrived back, I had bits of grass and bits of leaf in my hair. My boss said, "Where have you been?" I said, I got lost. You don't want to know. You got lost. I wasn't going to tell this woman what had happened. My colleague, one of the girls I worked with, was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Fine. I'm fine." I thought, I'm not going to even go there, because if I tell them I got lost, what are they going to think? What are they going to think? So I just said, I got lost, which is true. And to this day, again, I don't know what that was. Maybe there's a perfectly rational explanation, but I don't think so. I think you could say it was because you were feeling unwell, you hadn't recovered. I'm not so sure. I think somebody was playing tricks on me. They, again, were playing tricks and having a little bit of fun. And this tale that I tell you isn't that uncommon. I have heard of other people getting lost and completely getting lost, losing all sense of direction. So there has to be something in it. I don't know if it's that we are, again, slipping between worlds, perhaps, that it is possible on certain points of the planet and certain times of the day and certain times of the year, that bubble, that film, that divide thins enough for us to slip accidentally, perhaps, into another, I don't know what it is, dimension, existence. And I often wonder about people who completely disappear off the face of the planet. We do read stories. Unfortunately, I imagine many of the cases, they've come to an unpleasant end. But there are stories of people vanishing, absolutely vanishing. Car keys are left, passports are left, credit cards, bank cards are left. And you think, where do they all go?
Coming back to your experience then, do you think that there was anything happening around the age of 28 when you were ill and were pixie-led, like called being pixie-led? I think it's a really good thing that you called them out, that you called out and said, right, come on, game's up, enough's enough. Just
the language was colourful, you can imagine.
Wow. It's placing an intention, isn't it? It's saying enough is enough. And maybe some profane language helps to kind of cut through the crap. I don't know. But was there something going on in your life then? And the other thing I wanted to ask you was there any lost time in that situation and when you were 12? Because you said that you got back to the house and there were brothers and sisters and cousins were already back there. Was there any lost time in any of these situations?
It's brilliant that you asked that question, because when I was wandering around in this forest in Edinburgh, that is something I had a watch on me, and I was aware that I had to be back because it was my lunch hour. So I was getting really worried about that. That's something that was absolutely, I was going, I only have an hour and then I have to be back because the other girl has to go on her lunch. We couldn't both go together. So no, but I was painfully aware. I was really worried that I was going to come back and 2.5 hours had passed. And then how was I going to explain that? Not that I'm aware. There wasn't in the case in Edinburgh. I'm not aware either that a huge amount of time had passed, other than the correct amount of time had passed in Ireland when I had those two incidents. But I mean, I have heard again stories of time, people missing time. That seems to be a common feature.
The being in the hedge that was laughing, at 12 or 16. Do you have an impression that it was the same was it the same being or the same sort of being?
Same sort of being. I believe it was. It was, because I think it's. I mentioned about paranormal. I think that's different. Different altogether. It's different. It's human, or it's different. I do believe there are beings that they're not human. They've never been human. They're absolutely nothing to do with humankind. They exist in a different dimension and they come in. Call them fairies, call them what you want, maybe different names and different cultures. And I believe it was definitely not human. It's just the laugh, the sound. sounded so not human. I can't explain it to you other than that. Just like, as I say, like an animal trying to imitate a human. That's the only way, but not even an animal, a bird.
You mentioned the silence of the wood, and also, and this is something that comes up again and again, doesn't it, with this sudden shift in awareness and the sounds and the colours. That sometimes the surroundings are completely flooded with colour, and at other times they shift in, they almost kind of go into darker or black and white mode. So, you get this with time slips as well. People talk about the shift in the sound, and the vibrancy of colours around them that shifts as well. And I'm also thinking about the fact that you were ill as well, because I don't know about you, but I've always found since I was a kid and still to this day, when you're in your sick bed and you're convalescing, maybe you have a virus, or maybe you have a temperature. And I know that, sort of temperature goes hand in hand with being able to experience different states, of course. But I find even when I'm just convalescing, it's like, because you sort of step out of your usual routine, something about those times that's really rich, and you can access places, knowledge, awareness states so much more easily than in our normal, working days, normal life, all of that. It's like we slip out of what we're usually doing, and something about that, and something about the way that our body is doing something that it needs to recover, but somehow it allows us a gap to fall into, or to enter into a different state of perception of reality. So we can experience, I know that oftentimes when I'm really ill for some reason, I always end up wanting to, or feeling a real urge to research ancestry. I don't know why that is, and also I get really deep, I get very strong messages coming through, very clear. And, if there are loved ones that have passed on, I sense them close. As I say, I somehow go bananas, or, maybe it's because it's the one time, you could say it's the one time you're not working and you're in bed. There's, apparently nothing else for me to do. I could be doing lots of reading, but we'll get on Ancestry, an Ancestry website, and I'll just go bananas. And I've noticed that over the years that, I always seem to do that when I'm ill. There's something that calls you when you are convalescing or in ill health. And we can use those times. We can use it. It can be a very, very rich time to explore, what's meaningful for us. So I think that, it sounds like you kind of were able to maybe, in that way, use your convalescence, or your coming out of a period of convalescing. And I'm also interested in, what was going on for you at that time, and when you were 12 and when you were, I think you were about 16.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look back to each of those times, and obviously don't reveal anything that's, that you would rather not, that's too personal for you, but can you pinpoint anything about those times? Now, obviously you have the transition from childhood to moving into a young woman around the age of 12. And if you look at lots of cultures in the world, they had rituals, processes in which to welcome a young person into, an initiation ceremonies to welcome children into adulthood in these very powerful ways. So you could kind of look at it from that perspective. And this is something that we've lost. And, you were mentioning before about how, people ridicule people's belief systems and sort of think, oh, well, that's very sort of oldie worldy, but outdated and all the rest of it. And, these are the kinds of approaches that that took place in colonialism, because it was only by ridiculing people's own strength and their connection with nature, their own ways of worship and relationships with their deities, their landscapes, their what was true and what was valuable to them, and of course, what we did as sort of the Western Britain and a lot of Europe, and eventually, obviously, America as well, were ridiculing these ways to a point where it was okay to destroy these ways of being, because the ways that we were approaching the world was much more evolved and much more, rational, and, all of these sorts of judgment processes on these societies. And, this is what we can point to for a lot of the way that we are now, in terms of completely losing touch. And my goodness, weren't they right, these societies? And, what have we done? What have we done? Because we've just completely destroyed our humanity, in fact, in the way that we went. It's not, it's not to say that the people that did this necessarily were conscious of what they were doing. They thought that they were right, which is why we need to be super bloody careful now. And are we going down another path where people are supposedly thinking that they know what's right for us, humanity? Do they? Because it looks to me like they were very wrong in the past, and that they did not listen to the people that were pleading with them to stop. I mean, it's horrendous, isn't it? Anyway, I went off on a bit of a tangent. Looking at your situation there with potentially crossing that sort of threshold, potentially could be about that. But, that's something for you to think about, what was going on at that time. And then again at 16, and then again on this, okay, I'm out here, I'm doing my thing, I'm working in Edinburgh. So can you think of anything that was happening around those times?
I can, it's not something I thought about before, but a little light bulb has just gone off in my head, and I'm just thinking, God, it's great to have these conversations, because sometimes when somebody else throws an idea back that you never ever thought about, I guess maybe around the age of 12, I realized that maybe it was a little bit different to other people, just a little bit, in being sensitive, in feeling things, not necessarily seeing with my physical eyes, but seeing with my mind's eye and sensing things. It started I was aware of, as I say, energy. We'll call it the fae, we'll call it also ghostly things, energy sources, from much younger. But at the age of about 12, I became aware that not everybody could sense or see, like I could see, and see quite clearly, just by sitting quietly and sometimes just relaxing. I would see and sense. And also the attitude, unfortunately, for many people was, that's ridiculous. If you can't see it and if you can't touch it, it doesn't exist. Those words nearly broke my heart, because I absolutely believed that was ridiculous. Just because you can't physically see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I started to get very clear ideas about what I could and couldn't say to the vast majority of people. And it made me quite sad. And in the back of my head, I kept thinking, it's okay. It's just that the rest of them have to catch up with some of us, and they will. I just kept thinking that eventually they'll catch up with us. It's not better or worse. It's just different stages of progression, of development. So maybe it would fit in with puberty hitting around 12, 13, and then 16, and then 28, transitioning from child to adolescence, from adolescence to young woman. I still have very, very strong beliefs about that. And like I said earlier, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean you should mock it or you should laugh at it. Keep an open mind about these things, because we might learn something about each other. And also the treat, I used to feel very, very angry at, this is factual, how women in society were treated, at least in Western society, particularly Ireland, the UK, for their knowledge and their beliefs. Maybe they were a little bit different. Maybe they had knowledge of plants, knowledge of herbs, knowledge which would seem perhaps like a power or communing with the dark side, but perhaps it was just knowledge, and how we treated so many of these women for being different. And so that's always been with me, this being different and trying to make peace with being a little bit different. But there's space for everybody in society, and we're not to fear it. We're not to fear it. We might learn from each other.
Hearing you say that, it just really hits me, because not only did we go about the planet uprooting everybody else's humanity and sense of connection with this world, but then we came back and we were uprooting, anybody within our own society that had these connections and this wisdom and this connection with nature and with the universe and with the spirit world. All of this is part of who we are as human beings. And it was systematically rooted out wherever it was found. We've got to be really careful too, because in a lot of places too, herbal remedies are not even allowed to be labelled as such. They have such tight control over, and I do start to wonder whether people might even clamp down on foraging at some point or something, because, it's kind of been reignited in us. This, perhaps because we're seeing such destruction of the world, it's this sense of recognition. Oh, goodness, this is so important to us. And people are waking up to that fact, and they are wanting to get to know nature again and to meet with nature and to find out about what was our relationship that we've lost, through, I've been interested in mushrooms and things like that recently. But before then, what's growing in the garden? There's this idea that something will grow because we need it. So I've had a load of lemon balm grow outside my house recently. It was growing in the back garden too, naturally, because it does in Bristol, in parts of Bristol. But it was just flourishing outside the front. I'd never seen it growing there before. So I kind of welcomed it. I would come back from doing a school run, greet it, take some in with me, have a pot of tea. It's very good. Lemon balm is extremely good for emotional well-being. So it really, really helps balance the emotions, and it's very helpful. So there's this communion that goes on between people and the land around them. And there now is that kind of rediscovery. So I think we've got to really be quite mindful and watching out for anything that starts to remove our own freedom to commune with the land in this way. I think we need to be mindful, not to allow that to happen again. And I think it's up to us to reconnect with those green spaces around us. And thankfully you had these experiences as a child where you could run free, and even if you were unaware of it, you were kind of listening to nature and being aware of, obviously, the seasons. Really feel the seasons there in Ireland. And that kind of never goes away, does it, really?
It never goes away, Jo. You mentioned about, the communing, the communication. I think I see society in general, we're ill. It's ill. Western culture we're so ill. And I think so many of us are longing to stick our hands in the earth. Take off our shoes, run, lie down, be silly, roll around in the grass. Do that. Get out in nature, go for a walk. It's pouring out of the heavens. Get out, do it. We're ill. I think so many of us are losing touch with our souls, our being, our essence. I think so many of us would benefit from getting down to the beach if we could, putting our feet in cold water. You're not near the sea. Okay, the nearest stream. Something, just touching the earth, just getting back to basics. Yes. We fool ourselves that by buying the next article online, it'll make our lives a little richer and a little happier. It won't. I mean, it's enjoyable, it's pleasant, but there's something lacking. And I see it in so many people, this lacking something's missing. And like I mentioned earlier about just being 15 minutes a day. I'm not suggesting for one moment that all the ills and all the problems of the world will be fixed, but just stopping, switching off the TVs, the mobiles, getting outside, wherever you live. You'll say, well, that's fine if you live in the countryside, but what if you live in the heart of London? There are parks, even a tree, just communing, just getting back. I mean, with the Irish background, unfortunately, I've always been fascinated as well because I grew up in a very typical Catholic household, and I never felt the connection to the church. I always had the pull to the time before the church came, so pre-Christian times, and I was fascinated, trying to gather as much information as I could about this period, communing, connecting, the Cailleach, the wise woman, how important she was in society.
And do you make any attempt to commune with Fae, the good people in your life now?
All the time. I'm blessed that I've a lovely garden and good weather here where I am. And so I love to sit, particularly in a summer's evening when the sun has slipped a little lower and it's a little cooler. Commune, when it's any time of the year really, but when there are roses, when there's jasmine, there's honeysuckle, it's smelling. And I just sit and try to go inwards, actually, try to connect. And very often out the side of my eye, I will see what I think is a flash of light, like a popping rainbow, but a little one, a sparkle of light. Sometimes as well, if I'm out for a walk, you'll get a smell. I'll get a smell, but a positive or sweet smell, not in any way negative. And yeah, I think I do try to commune with, because I believe they are the guardians of the land, and they were here forever. They've been here forever, well before humankind ever set foot. And I hope and I believe well after humankind has left. I believe they've always been here. They're guardians, they're protectors. They're in the rivers, the seas, the trees. Yeah, they're here to protect the land. And I think as long as you go with good intention, with a good heart, you'll be, I think, okay. But if you disrespect, watch your back. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jo.
Really wonderful. I love hearing about your experiences and your, the wisdom that's come down through the lines. I think that's so, so important. And I'm delighted that you got to speak about this with your father. That's such a gift. It's so nice that he was able to tell you more detail about it. And I expect, that now you've told us too. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. You're more than welcome, Jo. More than welcome. Something that struck me yesterday, just as I was telling my dad, I said to him, I'm going to talk to you and explain about you. And then I said, because if we don't speak about these things and we don't record these things, they'll be lost. We will lose my parents' generation. We will lose them. And it's gone. It's gone. All these tales, all these traditions, they're gone. And once they're gone, it'll be very difficult to get them back. So I think it's very important for the future that we preserve them in some form, be it the videos, audio, record them, because they will be gone.